All right. So this has to deal with a debate, the future of the left after Trump, with Vivek Chibber and Briahna Joy Gray. Now, look, I know I'm getting a lot of pushback from a lot of people saying, well, Kit, why are you talking about AOC and Bernie? I get it. But look, these are front card people, and they are going to be playing significant roles in our political discourse. And while Bernie Sanders, he is in his 80s, and one day he will be riding off into the sunset, it is abundantly clear that he has also left an impact. Nothing great, in my opinion, in regards towards, I don't know, activism, political discourse, and AOC, whether you like it or not, is the successor to the Bernie Sanders movement. And dare I say it, when Mama Bear Nancy is gone, Baby Bear AOC will probably become, dare I say it, or eventually worm her way up on top to becoming a key player within Democrat politics in Washington, D.C. So, what does the future of the left look like? Well, it's not going to look good, in my opinion, because you have the aspect of, first of all, there's a lot of roadblocks preventing third parties. Okay. You had attempts with the People's Party and the Forward Party. As much as I was cheering them on, left much to be desired for. The Green Party has potential, but again, same with the Greens. The Libertarians have roadblocks preventing them from being on the debate stage, from being on the ballot. And so we have to ask ourselves, what does the future of the left look like? Because with the Fight the Oligarchy tour, it's very clear. And of course, by some extent, David Hogg trying to take out incumbent Democrats that are lackluster. People are trying to shepherd people within or back into the Democrat Party, which doesn't look like to be the case, because you have to factor in the DNC chair who wants good billionaires. You have to factor in the Clintons and the Obamas and all the other establishment bigwigs and Wall Street players that want to keep the party as is. And of course, then you have Cenk Uygur's brilliant idea of doing Rebellion PAC, which is nothing more than a husk of a shell of the Justice Democrats, which itself is a husk of what it used to be. So let's go and pull up this interview. I think it's fantastic. And I think it's a really good debate and lively conversation with Briahna Joy Gray.
Well, the somehow is a big somehow and is a matter of a lot of debate. In the wake of Trump's 2016 run, I remember being confronted with the reality that any conversation that tried to understand why folks voted for Donald Trump, including why an increasing number of Black and brown folks had voted for Donald Trump, was met with a flat, no, it was just racism, and to the extent that people were minorities who voted for him, they're just self-hating. Now it seems perhaps at a desperation, now it's a second bite at the apple, and he's running a much more authoritarian administration than he did in the first time around. There does seem to be some willingness to grapple with what some of these underlying issues are. And I wonder what you make of sort of the Democratic Party's maneuvers, which I would summarize as there's the AOC Bernie wing that is doing these oligarchy tours that are drawing out large crowds, and which I would argue are right with respect to messaging, although I have some skepticism as to whether or not they are willing to land the plane and genuinely put the Democratic Party in the crosshairs as part of that oligarchy, especially when election season comes back around and there is undoubtedly a Democratic oligarch on the ticket. And then also some of these internal questions and sensible possible changes, like David Hogg, who's the DNC vice chair, talking about a willingness to primary Democratic incumbents, which of course has been met with significant backlash from other members of the Democratic Party, including Hakeem Jeffries.
Briahna, my reading of the situation is that what Kamala Harris's defeat was kind of a clarion call, kind of a wake-up moment for the Democratic Party, in part because of the small but still appreciable defection of Black voters to Trump, but in large part the explosive defection of Latino voters to the Trump coalition. And in some ways, you could say the Latinos saved us, because for 10 years, every criticism of the Democrats and pointing to the significance of Trump's resurgence, it was a Thomas Edsall answer that the columnist for the Times, who has pushed this aggressively for 10 years, which is it's all racial resentment, it's all the white working class and their racism, it's all the inveterate and unyielding racist core of American culture. They were just waiting to come out from under the rocks, and now Trump's giving them an excuse. So the idea was there's this unchanging, unyielding, independent, what Cedric Robinson would have called the ontology of race that will never change, et cetera, et cetera. And suddenly you get a big chunk of the non-white electorate, working class non-white electorate that's going over to Trump. And you just can't deny that. So now the kind of the race entrepreneurs and the race mongering in the Democratic elites, who were the attack dogs on the Bernie Sanders wing of the party, they really had nothing to say. What are they going to say? So that, I think, was a moment of clarity.
And what did I say throughout the entire 2024 election cycle? That the number one issue is going to be the economy. Okay, it's not going to be identity politics. It's not going to be social issues. And while social issues and identity politics, do factor in, I mean, come on, we all matter, right? At the end of the day, if you got nothing in your bank account, nothing in your wallet, nothing in your hip back pocket, and every time you get the paycheck, it evaporates into thin air because of bills, debt, and so much more. I don't care what generation you're part of, the color of your skin, who you worship, doesn't matter. We're all going to agree, like, hey, who's going to make our lives better? And under the 4 years in the Biden-Harris administration, things got worse. And of course, you had Trump with his message. Clearly, his campaign, controversial statement. You know what? It's not a controversial statement. His campaign was more organized than Biden and Kamala's, okay? I mean, Politics 101 is having your campaign site ready with everything. Who are you? What you're about? Where people can find out all your interviews. And of course, big thing here, the policies that you're running on. Hey, here's why you should vote for me. These are the issues I'm fighting for. And the thing is, RFK Jr., Cornel West, the Greens, the Libertarians, they all had their campaign policies on their website, as did the Democrat primary challengers, including Biden. You want to know who didn't have that? Kamala Harris. When Biden's brain melted and he embarrassed himself and the Democrats in front of everybody, the whole world, okay, with that infamous debate where Biden was stuttering and stammering against Trump. It's clear on this. And so people gravitate towards strength. That's human nature 101. Go to the stronger leader. Go to the person that will protect you. I mean, that is an aspect that is hardwired into our brains. We go to the leader. We go to the person that will say, I will do this. And if they have a good message, perception drives, you guessed it, reality. So that's why the Democrats lost so much of their quote unquote coalition, because the voters were not impressed with Biden, and they sure as hell were not impressed with Kamala, because throughout the entire Biden years, Hardlands Media has done stories about how Kamala's approval rating was abysmal, even lower than Biden's.
For the Democrats. The other moment of clarity was that what is called wokeness, and I've taken a lot of flack for saying that it's real and that people hate it, but it is real, and people do hate it. What is called wokeness, wokeness was the mutation of identity politics into something much more aggressive. Adolph Reed, in a recent conversation we had, said this is the moment when minoritarian PMCs went from a class in itself to a class for itself. In other words, they actually got a class-wide agenda to press for their interests as an emerging class of managers and professionals. It's really important to understand that became a thing because both the corporate elite and the Democratic Party backed it. They backed it because of their panic in 2020 at two things, which were the continuing popularity of Bernie Sanders and the explosion after George Floyd's murder of a popular movement, which, if it had coalesced with the Sanders as wing, could have led to a revival of the kind of black and brown working class movements that you saw in the 60s, which would have been absolute disaster for the Democratic Party. They had worked for 20 years to extricate themselves from that. So the corporate, Jamie Dimon and all those people and the Democrats got behind a class-wide backing of a very aggressive push of an elite version of anti-racism. But that's backfired. Partly it's backfired in the public arena, Briahna. But what is less appreciated is that the very corporate wing that promoted it temporarily has gotten sick of it. And the reason they've gotten sick of it is that you could see it in a lot of the interviews they've been getting the last 4 or 5 months. They lost control of their corporations because upper and middle level management essentially started calling out the CEOs on social justice issues, which no CEO ever wants to hear. They're in the business of making profits. So here's the reason I'm bringing all that up is this. I think the defeat of Kamala Harris and the likely defeat in the midterm elections of the Republican Party and the possible defeat of the Republicans in the next presidential elections will see a Democratic efflorescence, the party taking power. But I do not think they will revert back to what you saw the last 4 years because their corporate backers don't want it. So what you'll see is this. Hakeem Jeffries is laying it out if you want to follow it. He wants the tech sector and the billionaires to come back to the Democratic Party. And he's slowly but surely, in various ways, signaling that they can take control of their corporations again, and the universities are going to be brought to heel.
You hear that? There's no pathway to reform the Democrats, Jank. So anyone that's a TYT supporter, listen. In my opinion, you're better off shredding your credit cards and your money than giving it to Rebellion PAC, because all it is a woof toilet. That's all it is. That's a toilet sound. In fact, hey, whenever I hear anybody trying to reform the Democrats, like Fight the Oligarchy Tour, Jenks Rebellion PAC, or even David Hogg, I mean, all that I think is, here's what I think about it.
Here's what I think about it.
Am I being childish? Yes. Was that immature? Absolutely, 100%. But I'm tired of this idea of the Democrats being our last best hope. And I'm seeing a new wave of people, activists and organizers. And you know what? I'm glad that people are getting involved. It's just more of, where were you the last 4 years? It would have been really great to see you out there. I just see history repeating itself, which is why I am dreading in the pit of my stomach, which is why I think I'm now regretting my words with Matt Weinglass on his 100th episode. Do you have any idea how much shite we're going to get from people as we criticize AOC's 2028 run? Because there's only going to be a handful of people that are going to have the courage to really call out AOC. Because if this is what's being laid out, I see the plan. You have Hakeem Jeffries and Democrat establishment leaders trying to woo in back big tech and the universities and the establishment, everything else, saying trust in the Democrats. Trump is kind of off his kilter. And then, of course, what else way to bring in more people? You have AOC putting on this dog and pony show. Oh, she's going to change everything. It's going to be great. There's going to be a primary. It's going to be like Bernie Sanders 2016. If they capture that lightning in the bottle kind of moment, and then we see the primaries play out, AOC loses, and then boom, we got to support the establishment pick. That's what I see happening. That's what I see happening. And I know there's going to be people who are going to be jumping on that bandwagon. I remember how 2016 played out. Now, of course, 2016 was a different game because TYT was the only big channel around, and they were able to grow significantly because of that. But in turn, there's going to be others. The whole entire environment here on social media is way different than it was in 2016. But I see this being laid out. But if you think the left or progressives can reform something that doesn't want to be reformed, listen very carefully. There is no room for you.
So to my mind, what you're going to get is if the Jeffries wing of the party is able to rest and keep control, you're going to get something like what the centrists have been pushing for, what Obama and the Clintons have been pushing for the past 10 years. And it all comes down to whether Bernie and AOC will go down fighting, or if they'll fall into line again, the way they did behind Biden. And if they do fall into line, I think this time around, the Democrats will clean house. I think they've had enough of these guys.
Do you have...
That's the plan. That's the plan. That's the plan. That's the plan. And I'm glad I'm not the only one who sees it. Because I'm willing to bet AOC and Bernie will bend the knee in 2028. That's if Bernie is still going to be actively involved in politics, but I see it. I see it happening. I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong. But I remember the People's Summit way back in 2017. Me and Daniel were there, wide-eyed and thinking that, yes, maybe this is a chance for people and maybe even inspire Bernie Sanders to leave the Democrat Party. And I remember my first interview with Jimmy Dore. I remember that interview. I remember it clearly. How wrong we all were. And for the past 8 years, in the trenches, dealing with censorship and suppression, being blacklisted, being shadow banned, all this kind of stuff, we got to warn people. All right. Citizen ballot initiatives, supporting third parties, being involved in local elections. This is how we bring in change. And I know everyone, it's going to be a tough fight. And, we are in a minority here because a lot of you know about the problem with the two-party system. And I don't think we're going to be clawing our way out of it anytime soon.
I think that all of that is very right. Do you have faith that Bernie and AOC are going to hold the line this time?
The answer is no. The answer is no. Sorry, Briahna. Don't mean to cut you off. I'm trying to keep my pausing to a minimum.
I think Bernie's 83.
Right.
I think he is chastened. I don't know what to make of AOC, to be honest with you. I don't know. Maybe she's learning. The thing about Bernie is if you want to know what he's going to do, you just ask him and he'll tell you. And he just tells you exactly what his views are. I'm never quite with AOC. I'm not sure.
That might be right. But if I were to imagine, not that I am, the Bernie whisperer or have any great insight into the man, but I've been following him as closely as anybody else these last years. And I would imagine that if somebody asked Bernie Sanders in an interview, who do you plan to support in a 2028 primary? Would you support a Democratic nominee if it were Gavin Newsom or Pete Buttigieg or any of these kind of figures, Amy Klobuchar? That he would say, I will support the Democratic nominee. And I believe that because that's what he said when he was running for president. And that question was put to him, like it is always put to these candidates to ensure that ultimately they will fall in with the Democratic Party. And if they answer any other way, we all know the sort of media onslaught that they'll be faced with, and they'll be called everything but a child of God and an enemy of the Democratic Party and willing to throw the election to Trump and, a proto-fascist and all of the kinds of things we are used to hearing. And so, yes, I think that's what Bernie will say. And I would argue that that's a problem. And I have even less confidence in AOC. You said a moment ago that you think she's learning in kind of.
I said if she's learning.
If she's learning. Yeah. Okay, I think she is learning. I think she's learning the wrong lessons. Her trajectory, her trajectory since coming onto the public stage has been to move to the right, not to move to the left, and to have an increasingly antagonistic relationship with institutions like the DSA, increasingly attenuated relationship with the left media figures that initially platformed her and helped her to gain national prominence. She has put nothing but distance between herself and the left over time, while at the same time increasingly courting a more mainstream audience. And when I
want to pause here, I'll never forget when AOC went on Morning Joe's show. I think this was like maybe 2023 or something like that. Maybe even late 2022. I have to look for that video, but it was done by Case Study QB. And what was interesting is that Morning Joe said to her, normally, you're usually, we're calling you out for being so left wing, but now you're not. And she says, oh yeah, thanks. Like normally, as I remember way back in 2022, we had MSNBC being critical of AOC, and they're not your friends, and we've all noticed it. AOC doesn't go on TYT anymore. What's the purpose of it? She took what she wanted from them and left. She'll never show up on TYT. Hell, even Cenk admitted that. She's not going to show up on the Jimmy Dore show or anybody else's show. She'll go on Hassan Piker's Twitch stream and play Among Us, or play Twitch. She'll go ahead and play some games, and that's about it. But she's not going to go anywhere where people will challenge her critically. Isn't that something? Isn't that great? I mean, that should inspire confidence, which, again, why do we need to trust the Democrats? And why do we need to start going on board with AOC and all these jagoff politicians who say one thing and act another way. We asked them for help for Force to Vote, and they were not to be seen.
I look at those rallies and I look at their attendance and I look at the conditional support that they get from mainstream Democrats who say things like, I support that they are fighting. I like that they are fighting Trump, but I don't necessarily agree with their message. I don't know that we should be talking about oligarchy. I think they're focused on the wrong policy issues, but I like that they're fighting Trump. That is a signal to me that they are getting support. They are getting increased turnout only on the axis of being anti-Trump. And I don't have a ton of confidence that the Democratic Party will continue to support them or see the enthusiasm they're able to gin up as something that the party wants to take advantage of, as opposed to something that the party is afraid of and wants to keep under control. And given that I think you're right about the likelihood of the Democratic Party doing this neoliberal pivot in the next cycle and taking the backlash from Donald Trump and not using it to move to the left and deliver for working people, but to entrench themselves as a corporate party, that makes me even more frustrated that Bernie and AOC aren't using the enthusiasm that they have right now as an opportunity to warn against that exact kind of turn.
And they won't do that. They won't do that. AOC and Bernie will not do that. I want to pull up another part of this here as well, and that is running as an independent. Running as an independent. And you can't run as an independent in the Democrat Party. I've done too many interviews with progressives and independents who thought they could change the party from within. I mean, look at the gravesite of our revolution, DSA. Yes, I'm going to include DSA, Justice Democrats in brand new Congress. And now you have David Hogg, you have Cenk Uygur, and you have AOC and Bernie with their three separate organizations trying to Pied Piper. I wonder if they're actually in direct communication with each other now. I wonder. I really do have to wonder if there's a full-on coordinated effort now.
The Democratic Party in the last two elections has shown, without a shadow of a doubt, they would rather lose to Trump than win with Bernie. It's simply inconceivable that they see, oh my God, look at all these rallies. This is the way forward, as if they haven't known that for 20 years. There's no universe. So that's why I said, will they go down fighting or not? By them, I mean Sanders and AOC. Let me clarify what I mean by that. I don't think, Briahna, I don't think there's any way that Sanders runs as an independent or AOC runs as an independent. I don't see any way that they try to start a third party. And you and I might have different views on this. I think that's rational. Ralph Nader ran on an identical platform as Sanders did in 2000, and I was very much on board with that, and it crashed and burned massively. To my mind, what Sanders should be trying to do is fight for, extract a pound of flesh from the party and consolidate his base inside the party in 2028 in a way that forces some kind of shift, some kind of concessions from the centrists within it. And here's why. I don't think that's going to be stable. They're never going to give him anything of any substance over the long run. What Sanders has to do, which is what he has not done in the past, what Sanders has to do is use all these rallies, use his concessions from the party as a way of opening up more possibilities for labor organizing and for the resurgence and the revitalization of the trade union movement.
And that's what's not going to happen. And I'm seeing people in the chat like these two are just wasting their time talking about Bernie, talking about AOC. But I think this is a perfect time to address and maybe warn people who are now going to be actively involved in politics or become involved in activism or maybe get involved in independent media. The whole purpose of these rallies is a hopium copium group therapy session. Bernie Sanders knows exactly what he's doing. He's trying to rally people in the Democrat Party, but not change it. He's trying to boost up the numbers, become a good face, and that's it. The day-to-day operations. He's not the person behind the scenes. Think about all the opportunities that Bernie Sanders threw out the window. And here's Hardlands Media's mistake. In 2017, when we were at McCormick Place covering the People's Summit, a lot of us in independent media were there, including Nico House, Hardlands Media. We were there. And what should have been the big warning sign was when Bernie Sanders dismissed the crowd when everyone was saying he got cheated. He's not going to stop how the primaries are run. He's not going to speak out. They're not going to lawyer up. They're not going to be ready. They're going to let it get played out. Now, AOC could, in a hypothetical scenario, win out in a few primary states, maybe, give or take a few. But at the end of the day, he's not going to get anything from the Democrats, even no matter how many times we in independent media, all of us progressives, have been proven right about how piss poor the Democrat Party is being operated on. This is why you can't reform the Democrats, and this is why also you can't reform the Republican Party. It's all a game. It's all a game.
So that instead of going from election to election, hoping for a savior, hoping for the right kind of candidate who can electrify the voters, what you try to get is a strong base of ordinary people through trade unions, through civic associations, through neighborhood associations, who can on a permanent basis push the Democrats to the left to the point where you can have the kind of lasting electoral rule changes in campaign finance, in local redistricting, in local what's called going from winner take all systems to some kind of rank voting choice, things like that, where, Briahna, down the road, you can think about challenging the Democratic Party in some meaningful way. Right now, we're just not in a place where, as an electoral vehicle, a third party can really get you anywhere, So we might be thinking in different terms about when we say, will they fight or not? The question is, what can they fight for? I think what they can fight for is opening up a space for more organizing of working people.
Yeah, and that's not happening. That's not going to happen. 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 That's not going to happen with the Democrats. They're not going to do that, period. End of debate. End of discussion. Democrats won't reform. AOC and Bernie in their Fight the Oligarchy tour, David Hogg, Cenk Uygur, doing all their three separate things. It's not going to work. It's just going to lead to disappointment. And if you challenge it, like Heartlands Media and a few others will, we're about to be vilified by, like, I just see if it's a perfect storm, man, are we going to get vilified? I mean, it's going to get pretty bad. If the censorship machine, which I really do doubt that Trump and his administration really got rid of the Biden administration's censorship policy. They probably renamed it. They're gonna probably make something new out of it, and it's just gonna get ugly. But I do this job because I love it, and I think it's important that we one day do usher in real change. But humanity keeps on making the same mistakes over and over again. But you can't reform something that doesn't want to be reformed because it's designed to be a certain way, and that is to keep people suckered in Team Red and Team Blue. It's going to be a fight, folks. Put your dukes up.